Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared, and as promised, talking to Rabbi Gurfein again. So we're going to continue talking about the 12 tribes of Israel. We were just talking about hats just a minute ago because I'm wearing my cowboy hat. And actually, I had a quick question, and I've been meaning to ask you this. Um, I know that there's like the various types of hats that Jews wear, but one of them is and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but is it called the strimal?
Correct.
Is there any significance to that, or is that just like tradition brought from Europe, or like, do you know anything about that?
Sure, sure. Well, initially, they used to be made out of fur. Today, I think they're synthetic, but the original idea began in Poland, where the Polish government wanted to make fun of the Jews. And they said, well, okay, if you're the chosen people, you should be wearing clothing of royalty. And so they brought out these kind of hats. You can even see the Tsar used to wear these hats, but they were the signs of royalty from like 150 years ago. And they said, okay, so now you're going to wear this clothing and show your royalty, but it was done as a mockery. So the Jews turned around and, Jew-jitsu'd, flipped it the other way. And they decided to wear it with pride. And not only they wear it with pride, but it remained a sign of pride. And there, tens of thousands of people to this day who continue that tradition.
I think it looks pretty neat. And actually, you guys, really quick, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, um,
It's a tied up Davy Crockett hat.
yeah, it's just missing the raccoon tail, right?
Or to just wrap it in.
How do you spell it? Do you know?
I think
Strimal?
it's STYL. Oh, hold on, an angel has arrived. Where were they?
Oh, here we go. Here we go. We
Thank
got it.
you.
Well, let's see. Let's do this one.
Unbelievable.
Okay.
See, look, there is God.
There it is. We were just talking before I started recording that he was looking for his glasses, and he had the same eye surgery that I did, the ICL, which is like where you get a permanent contact surgically put into your eye. I got that in the army, and we were just kind of talking about that. But okay, this is the strimal. And so I'm sure that some of you have probably seen this before. It's kind of like from the side, it kind of looks like rectangular, but of course, viewed from the top, it's in a circular design. And
Well, I actually, sorry.
I'm telling you, if I was Jewish, I would totally have one of those because I think they look great. I like
Oh,
them.
they're very cool. Could you put it back for one second? I want to show you something, a little bit more of a drill down on that. If that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
If you see the picture, on the highest row, second from the right, one more. That's right. Notice how that one actually, and the one to its right, you see that that's much higher than the other ones.
Yeah.
That's actually called a spudic.
Oh, so it's a type of strimal, but it's called a spudic.
Right. I guess it was from Russia, it'd be a spudic, right? But that would be a spaceship. But this is a different form. And then if you see the one in the second row, that's kind of like a UFO, that one, those are very, very old ones. I don't know what's called a matzah, but those were great for Halloween. That's
How
funny.
how often do people wear this type? Because
Well,
I'm not
those
sure I've ever seen it. I don't know.
you will only see that among very poor Jews in parts of Jerusalem.
Okay.
But the wearing of the strimal is only associated with a joyous occasion. So those that wear the strimal would wear it on the Sabbath or on a holiday, or if there was a wedding, or it's not worn like as weekday clothing. By
Okay.
the way, I'll show you something else interesting while you have this picture. You see on the second row, the forest on the right, that gentleman has no, the other way.
Oh,
Yeah,
on the left. Okay.
no, you were right. Sorry.
Oh, this guy right here.
Yes.
Okay.
I can't quite see if it is, but it looks like it should be. This is a golden robe that he's wearing. And this golden robe actually is made up of 613 got my English here. Vertical lines
Mm.
and 26 pieces. So the 26 pieces correlate to the name of God, and the 613 lines correlate to the 613 divine commandments. And this is a very unique Jerusalem garment. It's really only seen in Jerusalem, although there are pictures of Turkish royalty in the times of the Ottoman Empire that wore similar clothing. But instead of this, which you can see has a kind of a belt made out of the material, they had more what we would call a sash. That was usually satin. This is, by the way, also satin.
And would you wear this? Would it be kind of like the same at the same times of celebration? Is that when you would wear this robe?
Correct. As you can see by this gentleman, he's wearing that and the hat at the same time.
That's really neat. I'd imagine that those strimals are probably pretty expensive because I mean, synthetic or not, like they look like they're.
They could be a few $1,000s, but the synthetic ones are not as much.
Really?
Yeah, they're cool. I mean, I guess whatever. Some people like furs, but it's kind of cool.
I just I like how it looks unique, and it just, I don't know, it adds to the culture and everything, and it's really neat how that came about. And I didn't know about the gold robe. Does that have what's the name of the robe?
I never heard of one. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just never heard of one.
Okay. And you typically only see that in Jerusalem.
Yes, that's known as a Jerusalemite garment that goes usually back to around the mid 1700s.
So like you wouldn't see that very much like in Tel Aviv or other parts of Israel, like really.
If you did, it usually means it was a Jerusalemite family that maybe moved out there.
Oh, that's interesting.
And you wouldn't see them in Brooklyn unless somebody was visiting from Jerusalem.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you what's really interesting is right now we're having this conversation on this screen, and you just see how worlds apart and yet worlds together. You're there with a cowboy hat, and I can imagine a group of Hasidic Jews say, okay, now I'm going to put on the screen here, this is called a cowboy hat.
And there's different types. There's straw and there's felt.
Exactly.
That's funny. Okay, so if you don't mind, let's move on to the 12 tribes. We had initially started talking about the four mothers of Israel, and then we went on to talk about the east side of the camp: Judah, Zebulun, Issachar, in the English pronunciation. And then I was hoping today we could talk about the southern part: Reuben, Gad, and Simeon. And I suppose probably like starting with Reuben.
Sure. Well, he's the head of that group. As I think we mentioned last time, each of the groups have a head of the group, and Reuben is the head of the South. Now, South, as a metaphor, is always associated with wisdom, because South is associated with sunlight, and light is always associated with wisdom. As you probably remember as a kid growing up with Bugs Bunny, every time he had an idea, a little light bulb went on over his head. So wisdom and light are always correlated together. And therefore, the idea of the South and what is its powers, I think we actually even spoke about this. Didn't we talk about the position of the menorah?
Yeah.
And right. So the menorah, which is wisdom, because it's light, is in the southern part of the tabernacle, and its candles, the outer three faced in, and then the middle one, which is the main one, faced towards the north. Because in Hebrew, the word for north is tzvon, which means to be hidden because it's dark. And so the south is the idea of, as I said, light. Now, the name Reuben comes from the word ri'ah, which in Hebrew means to see. And so the word Reuben, although Ben does sound like the word son, or a nickname for your son, Benjamin, it also can mean between. Ze ben ze, this is between that. So the word Ben can mean between. So therefore his name actually means the one who can see in between. Now there are two ways to understand what that means. One is, as a lawyer might say, You have to know how to read between the lines. In other words, yes, there is what one sees when one reads, but to really understand the implications or the meaning, you have to go deeper, and going deeper is always symbolic with seeing between the lines, like what wasn't written or what's inferred, sort of, for example. The other idea of to see between is not actually to see between, but it's to see between what is the difference between this and that. And that level of wisdom, what we would call the level to discern, is considered the first step of true wisdom. When a person can distinguish between real news and fake news, when a person can distinguish between a lie, no matter how well polished it is, or truth, even if it's spoken by a man who mumbles, like Moses, right? So when a person is able to distinguish, that is the beginning of wisdom. So therefore, to see the difference between things, to know what's gold and what's fool's gold, that is that's the peak, the pinnacle rather, of wisdom. And therefore, that's why the leadership of wisdom, i.e. the South, is Reuben, because he represents that incredible, important intellectual facility of the brain to distinguish. Now, he's coupled with Shimon. Shimon comes from the word to listen. Shema, to hear. Now, Shimon is also, it's a very complicated name, Shimon, because on the one hand, it does come from the word to hear, but it also is related to the word for desolate. Like, for example, if you go back in a couple of weeks ago in the Bible, the story of Balak and Bilam, where they brought Bilam to curse the Jewish people in the desert, the one who had the talking donkey long before the TV show Mr. Ed, right? So that Bilam, it says that he looked out into the desolate land. The area was called Shimon. That's called the desolate land. And that's also where they brought the prostitutes at the end, when they brought in the women of Moab and the Midianite women to try to seduce the Israelis. So that was also called, on the one hand, it was in a place called Shittim, which is where the god, small g, of Baal Peor is. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with these ideas? Because they're kind of important. Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So are you familiar with how the Baal Peor was actually worshipped?
Okay, maybe not that familiar. I just recognize Baal. I know that, but okay, probably not. Okay.
Well, Baal and Baal Peor are not necessarily the same. Baal literally means master. So there were several forms of idolatry that utilized that name. For example, you have much later in the Bible the story of Elijah the prophet going into a war head-to-head with 400 priests of the Baal just outside of Haifa in a place called Carmel. But here is Baal Peor, and okay. Peor comes from the Hebrew word, which is pe'er, not the fruit. And pe'er means to make something beautiful or splendid, which you're going to see in a minute is extremely, I underline that word in case you didn't notice, extremely ironic, because the worship of the Baal Peor, the master of beauty, was a giant naked man and woman in a huge circle. And people who worship these naked man and woman would defecate, urinate, but I don't know how you say these words in nice language in English, but you understand what I mean. They go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I was a kid, we called number one and they were number two in front of these statues. And why were they doing that? Because they were making a statement that nothing is holy, that everything is just whatever happens to be. It's all coincidence. It's all, we're just, somebody threw a handful of mud and it went through the universe and evolved into our solar systems, and suddenly there were little monkeys who turned into us. And so therefore nothing has any value. That's their symbolism. And now it's interesting, just to digress for a minute, but I think you'll enjoy this deeply, that when Moses died, so it says that nobody knows where Moses is buried. And yet the Bible, the Torah, suddenly gives us like hints. It says that Moses was buried directly opposite the Baal Peor. So it's kind of funny, right? It's like, if you're not going to tell me, then don't tell me. And if you're going to tell me, so give me a GPS. But why are you giving me like a treasure hunt, like a clue? What's the clue for? It doesn't make any, what's that going to do for me? So the answer is very deep. because the reason Moses had to be buried 180 degrees opposite the Baal Peor is everything that Moses and the Torah teaches the world is 180 degrees the opposite. Torah comes to tell us that everything is holy and everything is meaningful and everything has purpose because everything is created by God. So therefore, that's Moses' energy had to be opposite the Baal Peor. So that Baal Peor was in a land called Shimon, wasteland, just like there was waste associated with that. There was the idea of wasteland, and everything could be anarchy in that sense. So Shimon is kind of a pivot here. On the one hand, Shimon can be a very dangerous individual. He's extremely powerful. We saw that in when he teamed up with his brother Levi and wiped out the city of Shechem, and other examples of intense power. So power is a double-edged sword. So power that's not under the rulership of God can kill innocent people, can just turn everything into desolation and meaninglessness. But on the other hand, if one puts their ear to hear God, ear here, right, to hear God, so then that power becomes subjugated to the service of God. And so that's why he's in the south as well, because it's applying the southern wisdom to the idea of hearing. By seeing is seeing. That's why he's the leader. When it comes to the second one, there, it's already a level of flip-flop. Depends which way you go. Therefore, he has to be attached to the seeing, and therefore he'll be able to use the hearing on a higher level. So that's the hearing and the seeing. By the way, it's interesting if you think about it. I hope I'm not being redundant. Just stop me if we talked about this before. But coming back to the menorah, since this is the south, the menorah's 7 candelabras are 3 and 3 on both sides and 1 in the middle because they equate to the 7 apertures of the head. Did we speak about that? Oh, we did.
Well, you and I did. I don't know if I shared it on the channel though. So please, if you don't mind repeating it, that'd be great.
No, I don't mind at all. I just felt sorry for you. You catch a quick nap while I do that.
No. And actually, what you're about to say, I kind of like tried to explain it one time in a video because I was lightly touching on it, but it'd be great to just hear you say it. So if you don't mind.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah. So the idea of the 7 candles represent the 7 holes. Unless you're from New York City, I have about 9 at this point. But the 7 holes are the ones that originally God gives you. Now, if they are 3 and 3 on each side, so this is because when God created this world, he created everything through the letter Bet, which is the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which means 2, or has the right means 2, because prior to 2 is only the oneness of God. So therefore, everything in the physical world is atom, and therefore you have a proton neutron has to balance the positive and the negative. And everything in the spiritual world is ADAM. It's a human being who balances between a good and a bad desire to find that equilibrium. So therefore, if you want to understand something, you cannot be just a left winger or a right winger because no bird flies with only one wing. You have to understand the truth in both sides and then be able to understand a resolution that brings the best or the whole, WHOLE, of the 2 sides into one. So that's why they're 3 and 3 because they represent the wisdom of the left and the wisdom of the right. Now, if you look at the head.
Actually, just really quick, I just want to point out to my viewers, you guys, this is what I was talking about earlier. You remember in church a few weeks ago where they put out that message from the first presidency talking about we need to not just be straight, or I can't remember the phrase that's used, but like when you only vote Republican or you only vote Democrat, the church has advised us to like look at both sides and pick the person that is best and not be one of these like people that just like stick to only one side or another. Like there's things that you can find in the middle, common ground, and it's best not to fall into like those kind of extremes. So it's interesting that he's talking about that. So anyway.
Well, that's brilliant advice. I vote for that. In fact, my alter ego life, when I'm not a rabbi, I very deep in the world of high tech, and I teach a lot of MBA programs. And one of the first things I tell my students is I said, there's so many of these phrases that like people learn these phrases and now they think, wow, I'm a cool geek in the high-tech world. And these phrases are stupid and they're ancient and only dinosaurs use them. And for one example is the cool phrase, yeah, you got to think out of the box. That's the stupidest thing ever said. What if the answer's in the box? You'll never find it because you're so busy being cool, thinking out of the box. So what's the real answer? Think. Just think. That's it. And you might find it in the box. You might find it to the left of the box. You might find it to the right of the box. Yeah, I think that's what I heard in the wisdom of your church just now. Think. And look, it just may happen that the best guy out there is a Republican. Just may happen that it's a Democrat. But it's not because he's a Democrat or Republican. It's because he's the best person. That's what you need. You need the best person.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a great thought. So back to us. So therefore, we have 3 and 3 because there's wisdom on both sides. But the interesting thing about this wisdom, which is exactly like you said, finding the common ground, is that the wicks of these 3 are all bent facing the middle candelabra, I think. I'm not sure. Forgive me. I think I told you this. When you move to Israel, you don't become bilingual. You become semi-lingual. You never completely get the Hebrew, and you start to lose your English. So anyhow, so therefore,
so the wicks of the
outer
wicks,
3
they point inward.
Yeah, they point towards the middle one. Now, if you look at the menorah, the middle one is the only one that goes all the way down to the ground. Yeah. All the others are on branches that come out, 3 on this side and 3 on that side. So the middle one is the one that goes all the way down on the stand. It is the column that goes from heaven to earth. It's the conduit. All others are aspects, if you will. So therefore, they are feeding their wisdom back into the main trunk, into the main wisdom. Now, as I said earlier, that middle one, its wick points towards the north, bringing all of that wisdom from the wisdom of the south to the darkness of the north. No Civil War analogies being made here. I'm just talking about the concept of north. I know I'm talking to Wichita. I'm going to be a little careful here. So, but the point of it being, therefore, is if you look at your head, so there's 7 holes are 3 sets of 2s. You have 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 2 nostrils. And their primary function is input. I hear what he's saying. I also hear what he's saying. I can see the difference. I can even smell the difference. But all that information goes into the one heart, and the one heart then uses this hole, which its primary function is output, right? Because man is distinguished as a medaber, the one who speaks. So therefore, the mouth, which is in the dead center, should be bringing a resolution that the heart, in its sensitivity, because the heart has, like, let's say, a left and right side, it's like scales. It weighs all the information to figure out which one is really the right situation or how to deal with it. And then it gives that input to the mouth, and that goes out. That's in brief, super brief, trust me, a small little idea of what the menorah is all about. So coming back here, that's why Reuben is the leader of the south, because that's the light, that's the wisdom. Shimon's on one side because it can flip-flop one way or the other. And God, that's with an A, is on the other side, because we have to look now at what's God all about. So God is actually, don't fall off your chair, but it was actually the name of one of the idols. It was the name of an idolatry. On the other hand, the name God, these 2 letters, Gimel, Dalet in Hebrew in the alphabet, actually represent the fundamental building block of creation. I'll explain what that is now. In Hebrew, the word God is G, which is G like Gedalia, or G like Gimel, the letter Gimel, and D, which is Dalet, almost like you have in English, J, G, and D, D, although it's not quite lined up like the English is, more like the Latin, I guess. But anyhow, so you have Gimel, Dalet. What do these 2 words represent? So the letter Gimel is Gomel. Actually, if you look at some ancient forms of Hebrew caricatures, which were from similar language groups like Aramaic and so on, you'll see in really ancient ones, the letter Gimel was a Gamel, or what you would pronounce as a camel. So the camel, the gamel, is the gamel, because it was a g before it was a su, but the g of gamel means it is one that causes. That's why it was associated with the animal, because the animal, the camel, are like, the ships of the desert, as they call them. They go extremely long distances with minimal amount of water. They can carry unbelievable weight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they are the movement. If we get cut off, by the way, don't forget, all you have to do is just re-hit the start button, because I forgot I've given up my professional version of this. Okay.
So it's like the concept, like in philosophy, you come across this concept of like the first, I can't remember how they put it, but like the first mover, the primary mover.
Yeah, that's right.
That would correspond with the Gimel.
Yes. In fact, let's take a look at that idea. What's the very first letter? Is Aleph. That's God. 1. What's the next letter? Bet. That's 2. That's Bereshit, creation. What are those 2 letters together? Aleph, Bet in Hebrew spell father. So there's a relationship between father and dad's creation, and the kid, right? Creation. So therefore, what's the movement in between is the 3rd level, the Gimel. That's like what, right? You have the 2 parts, but you have to have something that communicates or works with the primary mover, if you want. That's the Gimel. So the Gimel means to gomel, to cause, let's say. And Daled is from the word impoverished. Dal in Hebrew means it's a form of poverty. Okay. So the idea of the Gimel in the Daled means the act of kindness, doing kindness for the poor. So that's what the word God is all about. God is about the idea of not just talking about doing good things, but doing them, actually doing them. That's why, at least for us, Judaism, it's so important, the commandments, because the commandments are not just simply the intellectual experience of learning Torah, but it's the actual doing. And the doing is mission critical, because we're only here for a certain amount of time. And the more we do, the more we actually build both in this world and in the next world. That's why action is everything. It's all about doing. Everyone, there's a terrible term in English called killing time, which is really what a person does, because time is the only essence of one's life. To kill time is like a kind of form of suicide. It's horrible. Yeah. One should be living time, because you never get it back. So therefore, God is, again, a flip-flop. What's the idea of idolatry? Idolatry is the idea that I am God. I create God in my image. I tell God what God can and cannot do. I will describe to you, this God can do this, and this God can do that, and that God can do that. That's idolatry, because I'm God. I'm like the Wizard of Oz, who's, Kansas. I'm the Wizard of Oz who's moving the strings. Don't pay any attention to that man behind the curtain. Well, that's the real man, right? The rest is all just a bunch of baloney. So therefore, God is also a flip-flop, like Shimon is a flip-flop. And therefore, he has to also be attached to the light of wisdom. Because if a person is involved in themselves, i.e. idolatry, then they don't really care about other people. And if a person is, instead of making God in their image, is humble and realize that, in fact, they are made in God's image, so then that puts a huge onus, a burden, a positive burden of responsibility to serve the king. And serving the king means to build the kingdom, and building the kingdom requires action, and that action therefore is built upon acts of kindness. So that's the whole, that's the teaching in a nutshell. I guess maybe I'm the nut, but at least the nutshell that expresses that idea of what the South is. By the way, I think there's one element that you don't have here, which you may also enjoy. You're familiar with the 4, I'm going to call them the senior angels that surround the throne of God, and their names.
Yeah. And I talked about that a little bit in a previous video after you and I had talked about it, but yeah, go ahead and go into that.
Yeah. So those 4, again, forgive me for, I only know their Hebrew names.
Well, let me see if I can do it. So sure. We got Raphael, Ariel, Gabriel, Michael.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's it. The
right?
second one, I was a little like, it's not really, see, Ariel would mean a lion, the godliness of lion. Ari is a lion. It's Uriel.
Uriel.
Ur means light.
Yeah, kind of like the I don't know if this is how you pronounce it, but the Ulim Vitumim.
Urim Vitumi, that's correct. Or is from light, same word, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So therefore you have these four angels. Each one has, like, for example, Gabriel in Hebrew, Gibor is power. So, and the name, I don't want to pronounce it by itself because I don't pronounce God's name. So I will say Kel instead. Actually, there's some wild people when they drink pop, they refer to as ginger kale, but that's a little off the charts. So you have Gabriel or Gibor Kel, which means the power of God. You have Raphael, which is refuah, the healing of God. And then you have Michael, which is who is like God, Mikael, who is like God. And then Uriel means the light of God. So therefore, each one of them normally, let's say, represent a different direction. So in terms of your four directions here, this is another underpinning. For example, the angel Uriel, which is God's light, the angel, when he flew with the camp, he flew in the north because he was bringing light to the darkness. Whereas when it comes to the south is Mikael, who is like God, because it's like it just reveals God. And when the more you understand what God is, you realize there ain't even a close second. So therefore, the light of the wisdom creates it. The more a person knows about God, which is one of the commandments of the Bible, is to KNOW God, and therefore some people say it's the first of the 10 commandments. So therefore, it's the more one knows about God, the more they say, "Wow, there's not Mikael, who's like God." And then on the western side, which again, because you remember the west is the back, because I know in the secular, or let's say the Western world, maps always think north is up, but really it's the east, which is the movement. So therefore the west is the back. So that's the angel of Raphael, because when a person makes a mistake and through that mistake, they take down their spiritual iron dome that protects them from illness, and then illness comes in. So thank God we have a thing called repentance, and we have an ability to have medicines. And therefore we can heal our backslidings. So the back is the angel of healing. And the first, the going forward, led by Yehuda, is Gabriel. That one sees God's power as they plow forward through the path of history. So I just wanted to sort of throw that in.
On the south, Michael; on the east, Gabriel; on the north, Uriel; and then on the west, Raphael.
Correct. That's right.
Okay.
Now, I know I sort of took you to the last time about the flags that you put up on the screen. So I also did a lot of my own homework on that.
Oh, good.
I don't have pictures, but I do have the symbols, which you might find interesting. I just only really jotted down the ones that related to the four leaders. So, for example, I think this one you did know, Judah is the lion. That's his map. I didn't mean map. I'm sorry. I meant flag. Excuse me, flag. Right. So the flag of Judah was a lion, the king of the jungle, if you want. And therefore, that's because the ferocious and powerful lion is associated with his strength, the angel Gabriel, and the leadership of God marching his, expression of godliness in this world forward. In the north, where you have, again, darkness and Dan. So the flag of Dan is the snake. Now, the snake is obviously a very interesting animal, right? We all know the Garden of Eden story about the snake. But if you think about the Garden of Eden story, so the snake spoke, right? Wasn't the donkey of Bilam was the only talking animal. Long before that, you had the talking snake, and it was erect. It walked on two legs and probably responded to the name Vinny, because whatever. I don't know.
That's for one second. Let's stop here and then I'll rejoin because it's showing that it's like running out.
Right.
So I'll be right back. Okay, so the snake was so we're talking about Dan. The snake was upright or on two legs in the Garden of Eden.
And talking.
And talking.
Right. And then, of course, after it got zapped, it was slithering on its belly and also not talking, if you will. But the snake, throughout mysticism and many, many other things, is always the symbol. I mean, we've spoken about this a lot. We remember when we were talking about the idea of Moses had a staff, and when he threw it down, it turns into a snake. Did we talk about that? Does that sound familiar?
We may have a while ago, but just keep going, because maybe I'll remember if we have.
Okay, so you have the first example is Moses at the burning bush. God says to Moses, "What's in your hand?" He says, "It's a staff." God says, "Throw it down." It turns into a snake, and he jumps back, and God says, "Take it by the tail," and he does, and it turns back into a staff. Second time you see this is now with Moses and his brother Aaron are standing in front of Pharaoh and the sorcerers, and Moses throws the staff down, or Aaron rather throws the staff down, and it turns into a snake. And the part the Bible doesn't say was probably Pharaoh's reaction was like, you're bringing coals to Newcastle. Like Egypt was the place for black magic, and here's like a little junior stunt, like whoopee-doo. And so all the sorcerers threw their sticks down, probably laughing. Okay, let's entertain this Moses Aaron guy. Let's make him feel good. And they all turned into snakes. And then, unless you read it carefully, what it seems to say is that Aaron's snake swallowed their snakes, but that's not what God wrote in the Bible. It says, in fact, that the Aaron's staff swallowed their sticks. Now, what is this all about? So it's very deep, but the idea is that the snake represents, in its curvature, so to speak, I'm just simplifying these ideas, the opposite of the one straightness of God. So therefore, it always represents many demonic or evil or shady kind of things, if you will. It has the, as the American Indians would say, it has the forked tongue, right? And so therefore, it represents all kinds of problems. However, that power, if it's in the hand of a righteous person, is now a tool. That's the symbolism. When Moses held the snake, it wasn't a snake, it was now a staff, that even the snake can be turned into a vessel which will be used in the service of God, which is what Moses did. He splits the river and all of the plagues, they're all with a staff because it's in his hand. But when this power is not in the hand of a holy person, but in the hand of an ugly, spiritually ugly person, then it becomes a form of evil, of weapons and destruction and all the other things associated with it. That's why the Bible says that it was Aaron's staff that swallowed their sticks, meaning what? That this whole idea of evil is nothing on one level. Of course, we have to live on the level of earth, but on the ultimate level, there is only an illusion. It's something that God created in order to create a theater of the absurd, maybe, but that's the theater that we live in, where we have evil and good, and that enables us to see which way we will use our free will to come close to God, or God forbid, to be far from God. So therefore, that's what Aaron wanted to teach him, that all of your sorcery, all of your black magic, all of they're nothing. There's nothing. There is no snake here. It only looks like a snake. And that's why his reality stick ate their false reality sticks, if you will. Now, here's the kicker. The numerical value, as you know, which is, we've talked about this a million times, of the word nachash, which is snake in Hebrew, is the same numerical value as the word Mashiach, which you would probably pronounce Messiah. Why is that? That's pretty funky. Why would the epitome of evil and darkness associate in any shape or form with the epitome of purity and sanctification and a world of peace and love? The answer is, same idea with Moses. Moses was just a minor version of that. The idea is that the whole idea of Messiah is to reveal that everything is under the auspices of God. And therefore, that which appears to be the epitome of evil, you can't say it's outside the realm of God. Once you say there's something outside the realm of God, A, that's no longer God, that's an idol. And then there's no one God anymore. So the idea of one God has to be one. It can't be 99.9. Oh, but that little piece sneaks off to the side there. It's got to be complete. Otherwise, not one God. So therefore, the idea of one God means that even the ultimate evil has to be in the jurisdiction of God. Now, go and show that to somebody. Very difficult. Messiah can do that. So that's why the idea of the Messiah being the numerical value is the same as the snake, is because the same idea of Moses, when he takes hold of the snake, it's no longer a snake. It's like everything. It's a tool that God made that can be utilized for the good as well. So that's why the northern camp teaches us that lesson by the flag being the flag of the snake, showing us that all that which we see, which is dark inside the north, is really just the hand of hidden God. It's God's hand with a glove on, as opposed to the south, which is God's hand without a glove. And so therefore, even when we see the snake, we have to realize that the snake itself is also just a servant of God. When it comes to the east, to the
oh wait,
west,
sorry, before we move on to that. So it's like if as you're looking at the tabernacle traveling eastward, for example, or facing toward the east, so like Reuben would kind of be like the right hand, and Dan would correspond to like the left hand, essentially, because you were just talking about like the hands of
yeah, correct, right. And right's always associated with kindness. That's why you have God, the creator, the doer of goodness. And on the left, you have the idea of din, judgment. Now, one of the other things which are associated with judgment, and that's what is the word in Hebrew, din, that's where the word of the name Dan comes from, the same word. Dan is din, it means judgment.
Well, and that's why you have like what are they called? They're called beit dins, like rabbinical courts, right?
Yes, beit means house, like Beit HaMikdash, the holy house, and din is a courthouse. In fact, you use the word house as well in English, court, house. So Beit house, and it's the court. It's the din, where the judgment is brought down. Now, an interesting thing about judgment, though, or the side of din, is that gold is always associated with the side of the left, which is why it has the power. It's like, again, double-edged sword. Everything can be used good and bad, but gold has a very deep power from the dark side. This is why in the Bible, you'll often hear the terminology, you made idols of gold, right? Because there's something about the desire. People feel that somehow the more money they have, the less religious they need to be. Because that's okay, God, I got it. Thank you. It's very sweet of you to offer to help, but I got billions. I really don't need your help that much. Thank you. I don't have to worship you. So I'm rich. Or, God forbid, people who seem to be religious and have a lot of money then just use that power to create, God forbid, a false pretense of holiness. But the danger is in the gold. And the gold, therefore, is always associated in its color with red. And red is that side of the left, whereas white is the side of the right. And that's why you have in your blood vessels, you have the red cells and the white cells, and they're going in two different directions. Both are vital. You don't go in there and filter out all the red cells. It will not be a good thing, nor filter out the white cells. You got to understand you need both. So therefore, but each one plays a different role. So the left being associated with the red is associated with this idea of gold. And that's why you have in the side of darkness, if you will, the northern side, you have Asher, because Asher is another word for wealth. And Osher is a very wealthy person. So therefore, Asher comes to show you that, as King David once said about himself, he said, I am Anav Oni Ani. What does that mean? Anav is I am spiritually poor. Ani is I am financially poor. And Ani is me. So what did King David? King David was, by the way, like a gazillionaire. And he hardly was spiritually poor. Anybody who wrote the book of Psalms is not spiritually poor, among other things. So why would he say such a thing? And besides which, if he says that about himself, then we're all finished, right? I mean, if he is, then don't even bother. Like, just go hang this up somewhere, right? What chance do you and I have? So the answer is because he understood that everything is from God. Even my wisdom is from God. My breathing is from God. Everything is from. I have nothing. I have the money in my pocket. It's not my money. It's God's money. God put it there. And when a person really, 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 really lives like that, then suddenly you have nothing. You have nothing except incredible joy of life, which is actually everything. Otherwise, when you think you have things, they get really uptight. Oh my gosh, that guy just stole my car. My car. That guy just ripped me off in a business deal from my money, right?
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean you have to be an idiot. You obviously have to stop the thief, and you actually got to bring the other guy to court. You got to do that. But you don't have to let it eat you up inside. And that's what King David was saying. King David was saying, of course, I use my money properly. Of course, I use my spiritual blessings to write Psalms properly. But I always know deep inside it's all from God. So that's what Asher comes to teach us, that one can have incredible money and one can have amazing power. But when they realize it's not theirs, then they don't get off into the ego trip. They remain humble and happy. And on the other side, you have Naphtali. Now, Naphtali is a really interesting character because Naphtali is, actually, let me see here, which is the flag of Naphtali is, that's what I thought, the gazelle. Because Naphtali was known as incredibly fast. He could move at speeds like, I guess, like the DC comic book Flash. You know, he could move really, really quick. Now, again, it's a double-edged sword. Remember, in a way, you can sort of think like this. Each one of the leaders are the solid pillar, and each one of the sides have good and bad, and that's why they have to be locked into goodness so they remain good. So Don is the pillar. He is using judgment as a good thing, because judgment's a very good thing. Judgment's not a bad thing. By the way, let me just, people always think of judgment, they think like the wrath of the Lord coming down to punish. Well, that's a form of judgment, correct? But guess what? The blessing of the Lord is also a judgment. God judged that this person should be blessed. And I'll tell you another thing.
Because it's basically, it's like justice, really, right? Judgment, justice.
Well, it's more than justice. I was about to say judgment is also your hat. In other words, your hat has very strict, defined definitions. It's exactly X long. It's exactly Y wide. It has, right? It has definition. When you build a building and you're using stress and you have to know the nature of the material, all of this is judgment. It requires good judgment to know what kind of, how to build a foundation, how to put up the building, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The whole physical world is judgment because it's all vessels, and everything that has a vessel has a size, and it has not only a size in space, it has a period in time. It's wedged in a certain space and over a certain period of time. That's its life, if you will. It's been judged and measured. This is, if you want to understand this more, you should look towards the end of the book of, how do you say it in English? Ezekiel. You'll see there when the angel comes talking about the third temple, it seems to be giving an inordinate amount of time to judgments, to measurements, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's all these measurements. And why? Because this is the rectification of justice into holiness as another tool of God's. So therefore, Naphtali represents speed. Now, speed is a double-edged sword itself. Speed, back in the 60s, they always said speed kills, but they were referring to a drug. But the idea of speed is that speeding does kill, not just as a drug, even on the highway. And the idea of speed means that somebody they're hurried. And a person who's hurried is out of touch with God. Because somebody who's rushing is really thinking that they are out and accomplishing and succeeding and building and achieving. And I'm a very busy man, very busy person. That's Naphtali, which is the gazelle. But the word Naphtali means also to fall. As one of the great rabbis in the 1700s says, if you race up a ladder and you miss a rung, you don't go back to the last rung, you go all the way down and fall.
Yeah.
That's when you run. So the way to be with God is to walk, not to stand still. That's becoming stagnant and worthless, and not to run. That's arrogant, but to walk. Because the beauty of walking is you process what you see. I know people just walk with their phones in front of them. I call the mobile phone today is the modern form of the ostrich hole. It's like where you put your head into so you don't have to see the world around you.
Yeah.
You think you're looking.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, and you think you're looking at the world, but really, you know what? Tell me what you saw on TikTok 3 weeks ago. Exactly. There you see, the value's gone. But I bet you if I ask you a question about a biblical story that you maybe learned 25 years ago, you probably still remember. If I say, well, what about Samson, or what about, right, Daniel and the lion's den? It's right there, right there.
Mhm.
And it's right there from thousands of years ago because it's really real. So that, you know, and that's all you got. We are tick tock until, right. So you can focus on God and focus on God's word and have something not just which is real, but is eternally real. Even after you leave this world, it's even more real. So this idea is to walk with God. Hanuch, right, was walked with. He didn't run with God. God didn't say, oh, come on, hurry, you want to come to heaven? Okay, you got 5 seconds, move. No, he walked with God. So that's a very important lesson here, that process of speed can be very dangerous. Now, there is a positive time for speed, and that is when you're doing something in the service of God. Then, if you're doing a commandment, then it's good to run, because that's a holy use, because everything is positive and negative. So the positive is the holy use of speed. But that's why it's in the world of darkness, because darkness is idolatry. I am the Wizard of Oz. It's that idea of a very important person, and I got to get to this meeting, right? And therefore, that's the speed element. And I'm a very wealthy person. How dare you talk to me? Don't you know I'm rich? Okay, that means you don't go to the bathroom anymore. You're that rich. So therefore, that's asher, that loss of oneself through the illusion of being more than human because of their power and money.
So
Okay.
they're coupled with Dan because of judgment and measuring and like limiting those things. Like, for example, you're just talking about the commandments, running to do good, but not running in other aspects of life using like judgment, right?
Right. All of these are tikkun, fixing, or utilization of aspects of creation. So these 3 tribes are assigned to elevate darkness, to show that the darkness is in the service of God through the way they perform, to show that wealth can be used if it's used like King Solomon used wealth, etc. Or speed can be used if it's the way like Naphtali used it, to run to do the will of God. And Dan, judgment, to be used if it's used in honest judgment, not, you know, kangaroo courts, but honest people with honest judgment and so on, who aren't, when a rich man walks in and he's in a court case against a poor man, the judge doesn't think, oh, okay, I know who's going to win this case because that rich man's going to fund me next election. In fact, in Jewish courts, what they used to do, talking like in the days of the Talmud and earlier, you know what the tallis is, right? The prayer shawl.
Yeah.
So the members of the court had to wear the tefillin on the arms and on their head in order to have fear of God upon them. And they would take the prayer shawl and they would put it over their faces. They would block their faces so they wouldn't see of the 2 people in the courtroom which was rich and which one was poor, or which one looked like he was a real important part of society and the other guy just like he was a bum off the street. They wanted to be blind justice, that's where it comes from, in order to give fair justice, that they judge on the merit of the case. It doesn't matter if one guy had been a criminal and the other guy was like the town favorite. It could very well be in this particular case, the criminal's right. But if you walk in, you see, oh, there's that guy again, you're prejudiced. You should disqualify yourself as a judge. So they didn't want to see these people. They want to pull the tallis over their head in order to be able to listen and make no judgment based upon whatever, and only the judgment should be pure and true for what it is, irrespective of the history of the parties involved.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So
yeah, please.
So we were talking about because you said that you had like the 4 images or 4 flags essentially, that you had it for Judah. We talked about the lion, Dan, the serpent, and then if you're okay moving on, I'm pretty sure I know Ephraim. Ephraim is a bull, right?
Right. That's right. Now, why a bull?
Good question. I'm not sure.
Well, okay, because his father was called the bull. When Jacob blessed his father Joseph, he was blessed as the bull. Right? So the bull is, I mean, when you think about the bull is a very powerful, destructive force. You know, just try waving a red flag in front of one of them.
Yeah.
And
I
so
have a couple in my pasture, and I have a Jersey. Well, he's a steer because I steered him. So he's not a bull, but he's a steer. And yeah, he kind of has a temper. And like as he gets older, he gets like more and more. I'm kind of
grouchy.
like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't go in the pasture anymore when he's around. But yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's the bull. It's got its tips and
Mm,
so on and so on. And but the point of the bull, again, it's a double-edged sword. The bull can be something which is extremely destructive, or it can be innovative. And that's the symbol of the bull in this flag. It's innovative. It's creative. It's I don't want to use that term thinking out of the box, but it's the idea of original thinking. Like Martin Luther King said, I think I'm probably going to get this wrong, something like some people see things and they say, why? I don't remember what it says, but I can see what it could be, something of that nature. Like
yeah.
he saw through what everyone else was seeing. And that's the power of Joseph. That if you look at Joseph's life, it seemed like he was a goner. His brothers hated him. They beat the pulp out of him. They sold him out to slavery. He then winds up as a slave. And even though things suddenly seem to go up, they go straight back down again because the whole episode with his boss's wife and so on and so on. And then the next thing you know, he's basically running the world because Egypt was the most powerful empire in the universe at that time. He was running it. Power was a puppet. So therefore, and it was all his creativity. He could see and understand dreams. Most people can't understand dreams. Most people only see what's in front of their nose. Well, this is the way we always did it, and that's the way we're always going to do it, as they drove off the cliff, right? But Joseph saw that they were heading off the cliff. They're going into a terrible famine. It was going to destroy the whole country, and he could see the dream and translate the dream into practical reality. Okay, we have to build storage houses. We got to start stocking up now, even though everything now is honky-dory. Now, right, 3 little pigs, only 1 pig got it. While everything's good, now's the time to use bricks and build a house. Because once the wolf shows up, it's too late. It's too late at that point. So therefore, when the famine shows up, it's too late. But Joseph could see the future. He could see the dream, and not just see the dream, but he could actually make it happen. In Hebrew, in Israel, they say if you want to compliment somebody, you call them a visionary. And if you want to make fun of somebody, you call them a dreamer. And the question is, what's the difference between a dreamer and a visionary? So in Israel, we say the difference is the visionary knows how to pay his electric bills while he's accomplishing his dream. The dreamer is disconnected. He's got a beautiful dream, but reality is nowhere near it. And there's no bridge between the two. The visionary has a beautiful dream. He's got a plan. He's going to show you how you're going to get there step by step, brick by brick. So that's what Joseph is all about. And that's what Ephraim is all about. And that's what the bull is all about. The bull breaks boundaries. There's a fence. Boom. The bull goes right there. In fact, it's funny, I have to tell you on the side. I don't know if you know this. My brother, he retired now, but he used to be a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. And he was in charge of special ops in the Pentagon. In fact, he was flying Air Force 2 at that point, answering to Dick Cheney.
Oh
And he
wow.
sent me a picture once, which I thought was really cool. I'm sure you've seen these little wooden boxes with like these little pathways, and they put a little cheese in one corner, they put the little mouse, and the mouse has to kind of figure out how to go around to get to it. So there was one like this, and you just saw the cheese, and you saw the beginning point, and there was a direct line to the cheese, and all those little borders were plowed down. Like one tractor just went boom, and it's called Think Marine. So that's the bull. And his nickname, by the way, was Bull in the Marines. That's why I said that. So the idea of the
And you know what's funny? If you go on my YouTube channel, just a couple videos ago, I posted a video of myself, one of my steers, uh, I don't know how he got his head through, but I have like this pen where there's some like grass that's growing just a little bit longer, and he wanted the grass on the other side, and he stuck his head through that hole. And because of his horns, I had like a really hard time getting it out. But
well, he knew the
yeah,
grass
bulls.
was
I know
greener.
all about bulls.
Yeah, he knew the grass was greener on the other side.
Yeah.
That's funny. And the last flag we didn't touch on, which was one we began this evening with, is Reuben.
Yeah.
And that is actually the flag. I don't know how these are called in English. I'm going to guess dandelions. But they are the biblical flowers. You can find it in the story in the Bible where he comes back with them. to give to his mother Leah because they are, fertility. That's the word, a fertility drug.
Oh yeah,
And
well we were talking about this. Now this was before we started recording any videos and putting them on YouTube, but you and I had a conversation how mandrake is
Mandrake, that's the word. Thank you.
yeah, how that's like what you just said. Yeah.
That's right. And that was Reuben, and that's his flag,
Yeah.
because that's the idea of reproduction, bringing life into the world. That's what wisdom's all about.
So do you think like that, okay, bringing life into the world, wisdom, is that essentially why he would have been like the firstborn? Because you're talking about how you have to have wisdom first. So
Sure. Exactly.
Reuben
Yes.
first.
Right.
And then we were just talking about Joseph, how he didn't go along with Potiphar's wife, he didn't commit adultery. Um Reuben did, and as a result, he lost. So I was reading a thing from some other Jewish site, and they were talking about how essentially through that Reuben lost three things. And let me know if this is right, because this could have been like some other person's understanding. I don't know. But the birthright, the priesthood, and also the like the kingship that went to Judah because of the Messiah, the priesthood going to Levi, and then the birthright going to, well, essentially to Ephraim. Is that correct?
Joseph, yeah. But I want to just, if you'll forgive me, he
Yeah.
did not have an adulterous affair. What he did was his mother had died, Leah, and she was the main matriarch, and she's the one that had 6 of the 12 children,
Mhm.
right? That would make her like the majority stockholder in a way. And she died, and instead of his father placing his bed in the tent of Leah's maidservant Bilhah, he instead put his bed in the tent with Rachel. And Reuben felt that this was a affront to his mother's honor. And so he went and took his father's bed and moved it back into Bilhah's tent. But of a man of such stature, the Torah is ruthless, right? The higher you are, the more stricter the judgment from above. So therefore, it uses the language as if he had had some sort of an affair with one of the other mothers. But that's not what actually happened. But nonetheless, it was completely wrong. He lost those 3, just as you said. And in the end, however, he turned around and he and Judah both atoned for what they did wrong. That was the famous story with Judah, when suddenly they were about, sorry, go ahead.
Let me just make sure I heard that right. So he moved, it was his father's bed.
Yes.
So after Leah had died, he had moved his father's bed to Rachel's
So his
tent.
father moved, the father moved his bed to Rachel.
Oh yeah, his father moved his bed to Rachel, but Reuben was upset. It's like, no, it should now go to Bilhah, because like she was my, the mother, his mother's handmaid, and so he like moved it to hers, but that wasn't right.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
It like, it doesn't like expand on that essentially, because like you said, in the when you read the Bible, that's how it kind of reads. But is that what you find out in like the Talmud, or where's the
Yes,
source that you
that's
can?
right. That would be one place to find it. That's correct. I mean, you have to understand. I mean, well, our approach is that the oral and the written Torah were given simultaneously at Mount Sinai, and therefore, for us, it's a bit of a mystery how people can only find God in the written without the oral. I mean,
Yeah.
right? For example, one example would be in the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, God says there, and you will slaughter the animal as I have commanded you to do. Really? Show me where in the Bible explains how to do what we call shchita, religious slaughtering. It doesn't. So there are many examples in the Bible where the Bible itself is alluding to the fact that there's an accompaniment that goes and expands. And then, of course, the question is, well, why is some of it in writing and why is some of it oral? And for that, we probably can take that up the next 100 years. But at least in brief, that's why it's part and parcel. But
Yeah.
again, even in the oral, though, just like in the Bible, there are, let's say, 3 levels. There are the 5 books of Moses, and then you have the writings of the prophets, and then you have the section called the writings. And those 2 sections are not as equated as the same high level as the 5 books of Moses. So in the oral world, let's say you would have the Talmud, and then moving away from that in terms of, let's say, the need for credibility would be like the Midrashim, which is very interesting, by the way. I noticed that in the Bible, as opposed to, say, the Torah, there are no integration of Midrashim. But when you get to the Quran, there are many Midrashim from the Jews that are actually integrated into the basic text of the Quran. And one of
Oh,
them,
really?
oh, for sure, you should read it sometime, especially as a farmer, because one of the chapters most famous called the cow. So,
I actually have a copy of it. When I went on my mission to Spain, I was there for 2 years, and I came across a guy, and he gave me a copy where, um, he was like from a kind of like a different sect of Islam where they believe that a Messiah had come. But anyway, he gave me a copy of the Quran that has the Arabic and then the English below it.
yeah, well, whatever. Anyhow, you'll see in there, if you look at the story of Joseph and his boss's wife, they use that story and with the Midrash. And the Midrash is actually quite clever. It says that, let me think about this for a minute, okay? Come on. You know, look what just happened in Russia. There was almost a coup in Russia. What's happened
Yeah.
in the last few weeks? 3 major generals. One of them has disappeared. One of them was accidentally killed in fighting in the Ukraine. Accidental wink, wink, and
Mhm.
so on. Okay, and this is today. So those days, you had a slave, and he hits up on your wife. You put him in jail? I don't think so. You do like the Italians. You give him cement shoes and drop him in the Nile, right? So what's this putting? And not only do they put him in Lopak, with the jail with like the tennis courts, right?
Yeah.
So this is how you punish like a little Jew slave who hits up on a royal Egyptian princess. Well, okay, so the husband happened to be a very intelligent man. So he said, well, wait a minute. And this is where the Quran picks up. So interesting. He says, let's look at the garment that she ripped off of him. If the ripped part is from the front, then she's right. She was being attacked and she tried to defend herself. But if the ripped is in the back, she's a liar because he was running away from her and she was trying to grab him to pull him back. That's the Medrash. It's black and white in the Quran. It happens to be one of our Midrashim, which they took because we never had copyright in those days. But the point being that he was running away and she grabbed it. And that's why the husband realized, oh, okay, I got it. She was hitting up on him. And that's why, of course, he didn't kill him because he loved him. He saw what he did. He was a blessed man. So that's why he hid him from her. And more than that, if he really had done that, you think Pharaoh would then give the daughter of his boss and his boss's wife to be his wife? I mean, Asna, who Joseph married, was the daughter of his boss and the woman that tried to hit up on him because she was not a lewd woman. That's not what it was all about. She wasn't like some woman who couldn't control herself. She was a very deep spiritual woman who, using Egyptian kind of like black magic and crystal balls, she saw that she was destined to be with Joseph. And out of them would come Messiah, or an aspect of Messiah, the Messiah of Joseph, as opposed to the Messiah of David. But she was wrong because she didn't know that was her daughter who would come through. But that I mean, it wasn't just like, anyhow, we could go off for a million hours, a million years. But
Yeah.
I hope we at least covered as best we could these kind of topics. I see we're about to pop off the screen here again.
Yeah, this would probably be a good stopping point. So this is so good. It's always so good to like pull out all these like different details and have a better understanding and just like really understand this. And I hope that we'll continue and move on.
I'm willing.
So, but thank you, Rabbi Gurfein, once again for spending some time with us here on the Christian
My
Homestead.
honor.
And by the way, I should bring this up for everybody just as a reminder, in case you didn't see the video where I talked about this. Israel 365, they sent me this book right here. Oh, I don't know. Here, let me go to stop share. Okay, 75 words in Hebrew words. And what's really cool, because as Rabbi Gurfein is talking about like the different letters the Aleph bet. That's what you call it in Hebrew, the Aleph bet. They have it here at the beginning of the book. And so I find that very helpful because yeah, you can find it online various places, but to have like a physical copy, there's just like something different about it. And then you can look through these different words. Again, there's 75 of them, and they do a deep dive. This is written by Rabbi Akiva Gersh. Do you know who that is?
Sure, yeah, he's great.
You're friends with him?
Well, I wish I was.
Well, so he wrote this, and it was edited by Rabbi Eli Michel. I've interviewed him before. He's been on the channel, and they're great. I love Israel 365. If you'd like a copy of this book, go to the description. I have a link for it. I also have links for a couple charities that Israel 365 is running. Like there was a man recently that was killed by a terrorist, and so they're raising money for his widow and 3 children that were left behind. So if you can, please donate to that. And then there's a couple other charities, like some Ukrainian Jewish children that have been orphaned that came to Israel and to help support them. So make sure to check that out if you haven't already. But in the meantime, if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.